Good evening and welcome to For the Record. Fiji's economy of late has been moving at a very fast pace, and that has a number of ripple effects and consequences, most of it positive in terms of economic growth, disposable income, more jobs. And speaking of more jobs, one of the issues that comes up is whether we have the right workforce, whether we have the right numbers and the right training in this regard to be able to churn out people who are able to produce and keep the economy growing. With that in mind, our guests tonight are the Executive Chairman of the Fiji Higher Education Commission, Dr. Richard Wa, and Industry Rep Humphrey Chang. We'll be talking about what the needs and wants of the industry are, where the Higher Education Commission can help, and what the future direction is in terms of having a competent, trained workforce. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being on the show. A trained and competent workforce is something that the government itself has been talking about for a number of years, having an educated and informed workforce that can take the country forward. First of all, there is a symposium that begins tomorrow, bringing together the industry and the Fiji Higher Education Commission Monday morning. So, through this symposium, what are some of the issues that we expect to come out? Dr. Wa, I suppose since the FHEC is instigating this move, getting all the parties together, what do you hope to get out of it?
I think the important thing is that various players have been trying to do something about the problem that we have. Industry has been trying, the various providers, and they've been doing it at institutional, if I can call that, institutional level. For instance, one university will meet with industry, another one will meet with industry, some of the other providers. What we're trying to do now is to get a national set of competencies that industry says, and then we can put a national set of competencies that each of the providers in the country can work toward, so that industry can have a play, rather than saying, okay, to University A, this is the kinds of things we require, and University B, these are the other types of things. And they're not quite the same because different people from industry meet with different people of the institutions. And if we can try and get it at the national level, hopefully set minimum standards at the national level, then each institution can take those minimum standards and work higher if they want to, but definitely not lower. And that's where we want to start the discussions, hopefully. Over the 2 days, we hope we can have as many of industry people as possible there and succinctly define the competences required. As we go further in the discussions, we can talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, fair enough. Humphrey, if I can just get the industry perspective on this. For a number of years, we've had a situation where more so the niche markets, the highly technical industries have been asking for more qualified workers who have a better understanding of what's required of them, rather than just coming up with a certificate saying that we've studied this. I mean, what sort of situation are we talking about here? Can you just explain that?
Well, we in industry, we believe in the kind of output that you can produce when you go to a workplace. We are not a believer in certificate. You can have as many certificates as possible, but if you can't do the job, that's meaningless to us. So for us, we need people who are competent and be able to perform at the workplace. You know, in the private sector, the cost of doing business is quite high. If I can just tell you that my own little company costs us $1 every minute. So in 60 minutes, 1 hour, we are talking about $60. And in 8 hours, we're talking about $480. And if we multiply that, you know, across the week and the month, that's a lot of money. So we want productivity. We want people who can produce work and with a minimum of supervision, if wherever possible. We don't want to be behind them, their backs all the time and say, look, you got to do this, you got to do this. Because if they are trained, they should be knowing what to do with on their own.
But I mean, has it been a situation where people have come in after studies, and while they have a theoretic understanding, they understand the theory of the work, are they actually able to deliver? Has that been a majority of the cases?
I'm not too sure that, whether the majority of the cases are like that, but through my own experience, we have received people who has got diplomas, and they come from, if I'm not mistaken, from the FNU, and they got diplomas. And when you put them to work, it's not possible. I mean, I don't know how they're going to get work in another workplace, but mine is a small one. But you go to some bigger place, they'll kick you out the first time around.
Dr. Wah, I mean, why this mismatch?
I think there's a number of reasons for that, but instead of blaming any one side, I think the important thing is the providers need to know exactly what is required. And as you said yourself, there's a lot of developments in the beginning to the show. There's a lot of developments happening in the country. There's a lot of shifts in the demands from industry. And the providers having a lot of difficulty keeping up with the kind of competencies required. And unfortunately, with a lot of the shifts also, the way higher education is being developed, there's a lot of emphasis on theoretical developments. And because there's a lot of emphasis on that, the thing that tends to be dropped from the timetable is the practical part of it, the competencies, skills, competency development, unfortunately. And in the developments in Fiji over the last couple of years, or more than a couple of years, has been that's been defaulted to industry to take on. The Commission is of the view that that's not the way it should be, that the providers should be responsible for both the theory and the competency development, which is against what is happening currently. We hope we can shift, and we've had extensive discussions with our major providers in the country, especially our major national university, and they begin to see that that is the way that we need to move for development, to get over this problem. But there's another part that industry must play. Industry must be very clear about which competencies are required and what are the minimum sets. Currently, we have difficulty getting that from industry. They just say, you're poor in this or you're poor in that. What part are you poor in is not well defined. And we hope at this discussion tomorrow, we will have, on the first day, we will have a lot more industry people taking the floor and saying, look, these are specifically the things that are lacking in your graduates in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills, in terms of attributes and values, which is really something that our providers don't provide. And something else that our Prime Minister continues to talk about is the entrepreneurial skills. We're trying to emphasize those developments in the 4 areas. We hope with the shifts that we're trying to put into place and lobby our institutions to work toward, we can get a better partnership with industry. And the partnership, although the collaboration is between providers and industry, there are other key players, and it's important that we talk about this. Civil society is one important. The professional associations are another one. The licensing bodies are a third, and the community itself at large, because of the perceptions. Too many of our people in the community perceive that blue-collar jobs are not the appropriate way to go, and therefore tell their children not to go that way. And that's part of the problem, which means the poorer, so-called poorer in our society go for these types of jobs that Mr. Chang was alluding to. And we want to change that shift. When we hope with this kind of partnership, and we can work closer with the various partners. Higher education is not just the institutions, it's all of these 5 different sets that I'm talking about.
Doc, I'm going to have to pause you there for a moment. It's time to take another break, well, our first break for the evening. In fact, we'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. We are speaking tonight with the Executive Chair of the Fiji Higher Education Commission, Dr. Richard Wah, and Industry Rep, Mr. Humphrey Chang. The issue, the skills and competencies needed to keep moving Fiji forward, and a symposium that begins tomorrow, bringing together the industry and the Fiji Higher Education Commission. Humphrey, before the break, Dr. Wah made a point about people choosing more of the corporate jobs, and shying away from blue-collar jobs, and that creating another problem for the workforce. But I mean, when you talk about competencies, is it only that people who come in with technical skills lack the ability, or do you have people who've studied, say, to be accountants or pay clerks, the corporate white-collar job, so to speak? Does this problem also exist there, where you don't have the right skills? What sort of experiences could you share with us?
Well, I think there's too much emphasis being placed on white-collar job, and we at the industrial level, we are always talking about blue-collar job, and blue-collar job is the one that drives the economy because it's an engine of economical growth. You know, how many accountants would do a business that runs the economy? But you know, you can ask yourself how many other blue-collar people who goes into industry are now in business and doing very well. You know, if you want me to describe a person who starts from almost nothing, he was just a tire boy. That tire boy turned out to be a millionaire today, and that person is no other than the place down at near the golf link there by the name of Rama Murlia. And you know, he comes from nowhere. We studied together when we were learning about the theoretical part of the business, and he did not know the difference between a 4-stroke and a 2-stroke engine, you know. But there you are, a person who works hard and got his. In some cases, you have to be lucky, and he is lucky, one of the lucky ones.
Dr. Wah, what about the corporate sector in terms of competencies and skills?
Yes.
Because, bearing in mind, you mentioned earlier that the institutions are focusing more on the theoretic side of learning.
Yes. One of the things we have done in the Commission, and we're doing quite a lot of, is to do what we call quick and dirty research to try and find out the feel of industry. And one of the things we wanted to ask them was, what are the attributes of graduates that they wanted? And more of them, which to our amazement was not the skills that they get from the institutions, but the so-called soft skills. So what we're beginning to tell our institutions is that the hard skills should be a given. If you want to train to be an automotive engineer, for instance, all the skills required to be an automotive engineer should be a given. If you've got the certificate, you should know how to do all those things, both the knowledge and the skills. It's the soft skills that industry is asking us a lot for, and they're saying things like being a team player, being able to communicate, being able to be punctual, being able to know the work ethics in those kinds of places. So it's been something of a revelation for us in those short, like I said, quick and dirty research that we're doing. So we're saying to industry, maybe we should make it very clear, and to our providers, make it very clear as to these given skills, make sure we get people who are competent. So don't pass them out on a particular say a 90% pass rate. That's not the point. The point is competent on all the required skills that industry says. So it's a different approach. It's a more outcomes-based approach. I guess it's what Humphrey was talking about earlier. They want skills. They don't care about the certificates. And we're trying to tell our institutions that's the important thing. Make sure if there are 10 competencies for an automotive mechanic, that they have all 10 skills competent. Not 9, competent in 9 and not in 1. Must be all 10. And then we need to also concentrate on the soft skills. Just because they're a mechanic, that doesn't mean they can't talk. They should be able to talk properly, communicate, be a team player, work with the others in the team.
And that all those can be incorporated. Does the FHEC believe that those can be incorporated into the institutions?
Those are the kinds of things, one of the 4 that I talked about earlier. We talked about knowledge, competencies, attitudes and values. Those are the kinds of things that we want to include. Punctuality. The boss is always right. You know, those types of things within some kind of reason and so forth. But those are the kinds of things we want to tell the institutions to concentrate on now, not at the expense of the others. The others should be a given, and that's the way we're saying it. Unfortunately, too often we're saying these other things are more important and forget about the soft skills. But when people turn up for an interview, the seasoned people like Humphrey just looks at them and says, this fellow wouldn't even respect me if I asked him for this or that, so I don't want him here. Never mind how good he is on the given skills. And that's the kind of message we're trying to send to our providers. But we want to get it very clear from industry which kinds of things are really needed for which types of jobs and at which level. We're trying to break jobs up into technician, technologist, and professional. And different soft skills are required at the different levels. And if we can get this hopefully the next 2 days, will be the beginning of this process across the various vocations in the country. And if we can continue the dialogue, we should be able to get much stronger in this. And hopefully
Just following on from what Richard is saying, is that I think we need to build up a better standard of education right from the primary level up to the secondary level. You know, in our kind of situation in industry, I lost a lot of people who come for work, come for job, because I asked them to write a letter to me. And you know what? They don't write. And why they don't write is because simply because maybe they don't know how to write.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I interviewed them, and then finally I said, before you start work tomorrow or the day after, you write me a letter and say, you know, why you want to employ, get a job done here, but they never come back.
So communication skills is lacking. I mean, what are some of the other things?
The other thing is that report writing is very poor. You know, that's one other aspect that we want to hammer home and get people to understand how to write, how to report. And, you know, very, very important, because, you know, in the workplace you got to submit your daily work sheet, you know, and if you can't do it and it's already happening, they have to get somebody from somewhere else to say, hey, this is what I did today. You know, it's duplicating.
And does the industry have a majority of workers? Okay, I'm going to have to pause again. In the middle of my question, we've run out of time for this segment. I'll ask the question when we come back. Buluvinaka, and welcome back to the show once again. Before the break, I was going to pose a question to our guest, Humphrey Chang. Humphrey, the question that I had wanted to ask was whether the workforce has a majority of people who come in inspired to work, who've graduated, who've found a job, and who over months and years continue to have that passion to be productive.
Okay. Yeah, the quick answer to that is that unfortunately in Fiji, I think there is a provision where there's career guidance counseling going on. But, you know, a lot of people come to work not because they have chosen a career, but because they want to work and get some money. I think that's not the way to go, because, you know, people should decide at the early stage what they want to do in life. And, you know, when I was studying abroad, you know, this counseling takes place in a technical college in a very good way. And you know, you can go there and you talk to them and they'll tell you, well, you know, what do you want to really do in life, what your parents do you want to follow your father's footstep or not, and so on. And they get some idea what they want to do in life, all right? But here, unfortunately, because there's a lack of it, there's, you know, people just go in and try and get any job just because they want some money, you know, they want bread and butter on the table.
Dr. Wat, can education, can tertiary training cater for inspiration to work?
I think what Humphrey is saying is correct. One of the things we are in the process of putting together is what we're calling the tertiary education strategy for Fiji for the next 5 years. And one of the things we are noticing there is to ensure that the student is at the center of all of this. And the point that, again, Mr. Chang talked about is we find too many people coming into institutions doing work, doing studies, and at the end, on the final year, trying to work out what they're going to do. As I talked about quick and dirty research, we did one this year, just before graduation. We went to one of our major universities and said to the graduating students, what are you going to do when you finish this degree? You know, more than 80% of them didn't know what they were going to do. And that shocked the life out of us. We were saying, if these guys who have finished all of our primary and secondary school, finishing a degree and are going to graduate tomorrow, don't even know what job they're going to pick up, it's frightening. And so in the tertiary strategy, what we're saying is the students must be first. The students' interest must know what their interest is, exactly what he was saying, and be able to be open to the various pathways that are available for them. So in our people in all the different sectors of our society, from the ones who are not so strong and the ones who are very strong in terms of different skill areas, they should know what are the possible pathways. Currently, it's not clear enough. And one of the things we're trying to do in this strategy is say to our institutions, you must write your profile. You are an institution to do these kinds of things. Your target group for our country is these types of students. Come here, we will take you along these ways. Come here, these are the kinds of things. If you are interested in being a hairdresser, we're going to take you that way. If you're interested to do this, we're going to take you that way. And
So,
not everybody going to become doctors and the white-collar jobs types of things.
Is it that I'm trying to get my head around this, as you say, and Humphrey, you can step in at any time. But is it that they're getting into higher education, getting whatever courses they are, and then simply saying, okay, at the end of all this, I'll see what I can end up with?
Yes, I mean, all day yesterday, just to give you an example, all day yesterday I was doing interviews for jobs at our office. And when people came in, I said to them, one of the questions was, what will you do in the next 5 years? Just about every one of them said, I want to do a further degree. And I said, why? So that I can get a better job.
Mm.
And I'm saying, okay, you sure if you're going to do another degree, you're going to get a better job? Yeah. That's the kind of perception that people have in society. You get a certification, you get a better job. But that's not what the industry is saying. If you're competent, you get a better job.
Humphrey?
Yeah, the other aspect is that, following on from what you are asking, is that there's too many people who want to get a certificate or a diploma, not for employment here in Fiji, but to take it abroad. And you know, there's a lot of people who go through what is now known as a trade test. And if you get trade test number 1, the highest level, you got no trouble getting job in Australia, New Zealand, you know. And so this is where we are going to lose a lot of people when they do go to these trade tests and other certificates that they may secure in the future.
But then, I mean, market forces, market demands, if that's the case, then shouldn't the industry step up and pay better?
Well, we are doing that. The industry is trying to do that, but you know, this is a small economy. Fiji is a small economy. We can't be paying just as much as what was, you know, I mean, they pay about $15 an hour. I got 2 or 3 of my workers who are now working in New Zealand. One of them, a lady, who came to us without any knowledge. She does not know any knowledge. She is now the assistant manager in Repco in New Zealand. Another one migrated about 18 months or so ago. He came back to Fiji twice. You know, I mean, we can't even go to Melbourne for a trip because the fare is so much. But you know, he can come back to Fiji so many times. But he now is earning something like $15 an hour, Australian dollar, by the way.
Mm-hmm. And so, Dr. Wah, how does that compare with the challenges that the industry faces in not having the right trained or right competencies in the workforce? The people who do have the right skills move overseas.
Well, I think there's 2 things. In the past, the government used to be always worried about people moving overseas. I don't think we're too worried about that now because remittances are one of our biggest, in fact, the second largest foreign exchange income in the country. So we're trying to train as part of that market also. We're not training only for our local market. I mean, that's one thing we need to make very clear up front. But at the same time, the cream's going and the others are staying back, and we want to build that up better. So in other developed countries, especially Australia and New Zealand, what they do is they work with people in the workforce. Most of our training that the higher education sector commission is looking at now are pre-service training, if I can talk about that. The major section in the country that's looking after people already there with skills gaps is NTPC. And we're working very closely with them to lift that game also, the kinds of things that Mr. Cheng was talking about in terms of trade skills. But we need to do a lot more of that, a lot more of people who are in the workforce and who have real competency gaps, and lift them up to be able to be more efficient in the job. We're working at how we're going to do competency-based, recognition of prior learning and do that type of thing. We don't have that in the country. We need to do that and develop some kind of skill for Fiji. We're getting consultants in next month to come in and work with us to try and develop those types of things so that we can move ahead. Sure, we've got a workforce who have a lot of competency issues, but there are also things in place both at the Commission and with industry and the providers to try and move forward. I think government is certainly providing its full force behind the initiatives that we're trying to do.
Okay, and with that, we've come to the end of another segment. We'll be right back after this break. Good evening. Welcome back to the show. We're talking tonight about the upcoming symposium tomorrow between the Fiji Higher Education Commission and the industries in Fiji, trying to find a balance between the needs of the industry and what the various tertiary institutions can churn out. We're coming to pretty much the end of the show for tonight, but coming to the symposium itself, you've got a wide spectrum of industry experts, educators, regulators and facilitators through the FHEC coming together. At the end of the day, what does the industry want to come away with, and what does the FHEC want to come away with? Question to both the gentlemen.
Okay, I think first thing first, people will come to learn about what certificate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is all about, and 6. But currently, people do not understand what this certificate meant to them. And moreover, the way I am seeing things working for the future is that this certificate level will be a benchmark for, say, something like salary, wages. How much do you pay for certificate 2, certificate 3, certificate 4, all right? I am thinking that this will come about at some stage in the life of the industry. And so, yeah, they will come and learn all that. And, then we also want to instill in the minds of the industrial people that they should also take on attachment, the people who want to get hands-on training, to learn from them. Because after all, these people who come and learn from them may one day become their employee. And so if the industry can give them the training now so that they can equip themselves for the future, who knows, you might be taking them back, or even if you don't take them back, somebody else will take them, but it's in the interest of the country.
Doc? I want to bring up something that we haven't talked about. That's the itinerant worker in Fiji. We have a lot of people in subsistent agriculture, and when a big construction or something like that comes up, these guys leave their work in the agriculture and go and work. I'll give you an example. I live out in Navua. When the hospital was being built, the farmers from around the place left their jobs and went to work as bricklayers and tile layers and whatever else. So the farms were empty and people were working there. As soon as they finished, they went back. Semi-skilled people, and these are the kinds of people I'm saying we want to target within the industry to ensure that their level of skill is picked up. You hear people in the construction industry keep complaining about the finishing of our skilled, so-called skilled people, and they say they're not quite appropriate standard to build hotels in the country. And that's one of the areas we're trying to target at the moment, to build that. So the itinerant skilled people is one. The other one is the issue about supply and demand in the country. We know what we're supplying from the providers. We don't know what's required or not well enough. So therefore we get a lot of people coming out of the universities can't find jobs, and then we have the backlash because of that. So one of the things the Commission is trying to do at the moment, we've had discussions with FRCA and with FNPF to try and work out this very point that Humphrey was talking about, but we want to allude to it a little bit further. We have a 10-level framework. We want to link that to the various types of jobs that we have in the country. We don't know how many people are out there. The Bureau of Stats has some figures, but we really want to link it to live data, which FRCA should have because of the tax. But FRCA doesn't keep the job types, and we need to build that up into FRCA, build that up into the FNPF, and have a national ID number where we can link that into the USP identification number, FNUs, and so on. And then we can know how many people are coming through, how many are required, and if we can give that to the national planning, then we can know which jobs, which projects are coming, and therefore project how many people are required. We're trying to work at that, the supply and demand issue there. And if we can work at the supply and demand issue in terms of quantity, then quality is the next level. And it's those types of issues. The lack of data is just one of our major problems in this area. And we hope, again, as part of the things out of the symposium, we can try and work better with industry to get that bit. So it's not only the quality of our graduates, but the quantity also.
When you do have this up and running, the excuse me, the program between FERCA, FNPF, and the institutions, how then would you guide students? Because I'm understanding that there would be projections about future needs for the labor market based on the numbers that come in.
Yes. Yes, there is. In fact, the data that comes out of the national planning is used to provide scholarships for our people. But we notice a lot of people don't take scholarships in particular demand areas because, again, that's the sector that I was talking about earlier. The community want people to go in a particular area. It's our job. We're missing out on the pathways that we need to put a lot more effort in advocacy. I think Humphrey was right in talking about careers internationally, or at least career advice internationally, and the lack thereof within our country. And we're trying to push that a lot more. From the Commission's perspective, we go out to the community. We have what we call a dynamic marketing team that goes out to the provincial councils. We have earmarked the provinces that have low people entering the higher education sector. We've talked to provincial councils, the education committees, the various schools in the remote areas, because remote areas are a problem, and we're going out there at the moment. We've visited at least 5 of our provinces that have low outputs, and we're trying to do a lot more of that to get the community involved, because they're an integral and very important part of the sector. And they don't think they are, but they are really. And,
I just want to take a point further where Richard said about the semi-skilled people not performing as expected. Now, one of the problem as I see in the workplace or generally around the country is that people don't go and learn informal things, all right? Now, when they sit around the cover bowl, they talk rubbish, they talk about, how many bottles of beer that they have consumed and, the rugby that they saw and so on. But they never talk about things that affect their life, I give you an example. I wanted to set up a packing station in my farm. And I went around and I told people that I'm going to do this. And I asked them a few questions, what kind of a taro would you plant for export? And they say, any taro. No, the answer is not any taro. You can't be just any taro. Yeah? It's just got to be specific type. And they don't even know the name, So these are things that they don't discuss over the grog bowl, but discuss things which is no good for them.
It goes back to my earlier question about whether there's any inspiration amongst these, not just employees, but as you mentioned out, farmers and people in the informal sector. But I mean, having made that point, we will take another break. We will continue discussions when we come back. Welcome back to For the Record. We're just about to wrap up tonight's show, but we still have a few minutes to go. On the job training, there are people who are given mentorship. They're shown the ropes, they're told what to do and how to do it and what best practices are. Other companies send their employees for further studies because they want to nurture a productive workforce. It works, but it's very limited, isn't it?
That's right. Now, what matters here is that the industry is also sometimes choosy, because they don't want to pick any Tom, Dick and Harry to come and learn, because for fear that they will also take away some of the secrets. So they are very choosy in some sense in that way. So what we want to do in industry is that to open up to people who generally wants to learn a skill and put their hands on getting a job done. Now, I said earlier that you can get all the certificates in the world, but without a hands-on experience, you are nothing. And this is where on Monday or Tuesday, we're going to try and get people to show some interest in recruiting people and lead the way to this kind of thing. Now, the other thing that I want to bring in is the NEC, that's the National Employment Center. They got a scheme there which allows 6-month provisional training, and the employer pays half and the employee pays half, government pays half. That unfortunately is not working as well as it should. Now, why? One of the reasons is that 6 months, you cannot learn anything in 6 months. It's a very short time. So really they want to increase that 6 months to more than 6 months. And, and then hopefully that whoever is being trained can be employed by the same employer.
Who's providing the training in the first place, right? Doc, if I can just bring you into this issue of on-the-job training, and from what Humphrey is saying, employers being choosy and on-the-job training being somewhat lacking.
Okay, there is a particular on-the-job training that has been reduced over the years, and that's the apprenticeship scheme that we've had over the years. The numbers were around 500 per year. They were dropped right down to below 200, and government is beginning to pick that back up. And when we go out and talk to industry about the different type of workers and the issue that we're talking about here today, the lack of skills, everybody says if we brought back the apprenticeship scheme, it would work much better. And then I'm saying to industry, so if that's true, why don't we bring it back? Industry says they don't want to pay. Because what used to happen in the past was government was training most of the apprenticeships. And now that government has sold out a lot of these assets that they had apprenticeships trained on, these apprentices are no longer available to be picked off at the end. But I think that's something that we need to look at as a whole. I think most of the sectors and all the key players need to come out of their comfort zone and see what we need to do to work to go forward and work together. Get out of it. I think we continue to stay in our comfort zone and point at each other. And I think that's the problem of this on-the-job training, and that's why you say there's a limited amount happening. But I want to just if I may, just go back to this knowledge thing about knowledge and the grog bowl drinking and the knowledge there. I think one of our big problems, not only in Fiji but the Pacific as a whole, is that we lack the will to share knowledge. And there's too much, because that's our tradition. I'm a fisherman, I know exactly how to fish. I'm not going to share it with Humphrey. He's going to catch all my fish. So why should I share it with him? And that notion has to be changed. And I think, again, this idea of the knowledge society that we're working towards, which is one of our functions in the Commission, we're trying to open up that kind of thinking. And the idea about the national ID number is to open it up, share the data that we have in the different parts of government. At the moment, that's something very hard to cut across. If we say, can I get some of your data? Sorry, this is ours. You got to get permission from the peers. And I'm saying, you got to be kidding me. We're all working together for the same thing. But it's that notion of knowledge sharing is still something that's holding us back in this country. Right. And if we can push forward on that, the mentors in the jobs can give on-the-job training. Because many of these managers are frightened to share their knowledge with the guys downstairs because they say, this fellow will take my job. I would be glad for somebody to take my job. To me, that's what I'm all about.
If he can do the job better than me, then he deserves
it. I'd love that. I'd love that. Yeah.
And with that, we're going to have to wrap up tonight's show. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here, and best of luck with the symposium tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And that was For the Record this evening. Up next is Nemani Ndalai Matiki with his weekly column, My Say. From me for tonight, it's goodbye. But remember, if you have any questions or queries or comments, email fortherecord@fbc.com.fj. Until next Sunday, goodbye.
Good evening. I'm Nemani Ndalai Matiki of the Fiji Sun. Welcome to Fiji's only TV editorial show. This week on My Say, I'll talk about the continuing investigations on the so-called Christian states. The integrity of the continuing investigations into the brains and participants of the so-called Christian sovereign states in Ra, Nandronga, and Navosa depends on maintaining the momentum and standards. So much information is now out in the open. It requires the careful discernment of our law enforcement officers to ascertain whether the law has been violated. The central figure in this investigation is Sydney-based Indigenous activist Meroni Kerwin. At some point in this process, the long arm of the law that Prime Minister Voreqe Bainimarama referred to would weave its way into Sydney. In the meantime, all those who associated with her here when she was freely moving between Fiji and Australia should be included in the routine investigations. The list should have names of those chiefs and SODELPA officials who were present when Ms. Kerwin made a presentation to them at the Fijian Teachers Association Hall in Knowledge Street in Suva in May last year. Ms. Kerwin spoke about a petition calling for the return of Fiji to the descendants of the chiefs who ceded Fiji to Great Britain on the 10th of October 1874 in Levuka. She was to file the petition at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, Netherlands. So far, there is nothing on the official records there that it has been filed. What has happened, though, is that she has used it as a platform to launch the so-called Christian states. The document gave the members of the rebel movement the moral support it needed. Some of the descendants of the signatories to the deed of cession were present in that FTA meeting in May last year. Lawyer and senior SODELPA advisor Andilitia Ngyoni Baravi has come out publicly and said that she was also present, but she advised the chiefs against signing it. They ignored that advice and went on to sign the document. Ms. Kerwin then traveled to Somosomo in Taveuni and did the same presentation at Mbosini Vanua there. The Tuithakau, Ratu Nainga Malal Malavu, now SODELPA president, followed Andilitia's counsel and refused to sign. All those who signed should now be on the list to be interviewed by the police. They cannot be overlooked or spared to give credence to the investigations. No one is above the law. Just because they are chiefs or high-profile politicians does not mean that they should be absolved from investigations. They may all be innocent, but they have to undergo the same scrutiny that others who have been associated with Ms. Kerwin have been subjected to, because we are all equal before the law. Ms. Kerwin has poisoned the minds of groups in Ra, Nadronga and Bosa with a constant propaganda on social media. She knows that what she is trying to achieve is not possible and against the law. She is driven by an extremist ideology that has no place in the 21st century Fiji. On several occasions, she vents her anger and encourages violence and retribution against those who question her in the name of God. She sounds like one of those religious bigots who use deity to satisfy their lust for power, fame, and fortune. All of us should learn from this experience and beware of overseas fly-by-night operators who come here and take advantage of our naivety to satisfy their own selfish interests. This notion that the Itoke customary rights and land ownership are under threat is simply not true. If it was true, you would hear it from ordinary Itoke and their chiefs who reside in their provinces, districts, and villages. Life carries on as normal because their rights are fully intact. Let's wake up and realize that there are elements in our society, and they are in the minority, stirred up by suspicious foreign forces, want to divide and destroy our unity and resolve as a nation. Let's exercise wisdom and support policies that unite us and promote peace and harmony. I'm Neman Indalembetiki, and that was my say for this week. For more of my views, you can read the Fiji Sun. See you next week.